Call a meeting to order, for the Water Management District, special meeting on the budget on May 29th. Roll call, please.
Director Anderson? Here. Director Daniels is absent. Director Edwards?
Here.
Director Lindor?
Here.
Director Paul? Here. Director Oglesby has not yet arrived, and Chair Riley.
Here on Zoom. Can we go to the Pledge of Allegiance, please? I'll ask, who am I gonna ask? Alvin, can you lead?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
I'd like to see if there are any members of the public that would like to comment on any item that's not on tonight's agenda, which is a special meeting on the budget. And I think that's in order, but if it is, let's proceed. If it's not, call me on it, Michael.
You're all right.
Chair Riley, we have one member of the public in attendance, however, no raised hands.
Okay, then back to the board. Are there any additions and corrections to the agenda for tonight?
None yet.
Okay, there'll be a few revisions when we get to those points. Please submit them at that time. All right, well, let's do the discussion item and let's move ahead. And Dave, you and Nikhil, please.
Yes, I'll get started. Good evening, Chair, board members, members of the public, those who are with us and those who will be joining us. So we are gathered here to go over the proposed fiscal year 25-26 budget for the district, which will be finalized at the June 16th meeting. And this is an opportunity for us to receive any public comments, discuss any changes or any modifications if there are any before we finalize the budget. I'll be going over the budget highlights. A copy of the budget book is part of the staff report, and the highlights will be presented in this PowerPoint that I'll be sharing. So before we dive in, I just want to note a couple of things. Number one, as you all know, that the district budget serves multiple purposes. It's not only a policy document, it's also a financial plan, and it's we have not only tried to highlight the numbers, but also what's behind the numbers. And so towards that end, last year we incorporated the strategic plan in the budget document to show the linkage between the two documents. And in this year, we have made some additional improvements. So for instance, there's a section that's called the district at a glance, and that provides statistical information about the work done in the various divisions, the number of inspections done, the permits processed, the number of steelhead that's rescued, the amount of water that's injected, and so on. So that's the day-to-day operations that the budget supports besides the strategic priorities. And you'll also notice that we have added a section on the grants that the district has and how those grants are being used to increase water supply and manage the water situation in the district. And then finally, there's also a section on policies, and this is just an attempt to add or provide more transparency for the policies that the district has. So with that, I'm going to dive in. Let's see if this thing. Sorry, you'll have to move me. Okay, so the budget has 5 sections. Section 1 is the narrative, and it starts with the resolution and the transmittal letter that provides the major changes that we have in the budget from what we had in the current year. There we also have the mission, vision, the district purpose, goals, and what we do as a district, along with the budget timeline. And then section 2 is about expenditures by year, by fund, by division. And then the biggest portion of our budget is for projects. So there's a detail about project expenditures by division. We also have a basic version of the capital improvement plan. These are the big expenditures that we have, whether for water purchases or other grants, such as the Pure Water Monterey expansion project. Thank you. And then there's a narrative about capital budgets and grants. We also have a section on capital asset purchases. We aren't proposing a lot of assets for next year. The biggest asset is replacing a 2001 Dodge Ram with a multi-purpose vehicle. And then we also have what's called a capital asset replacement schedule. This is a listing of all the equipments and facilities that we have. And this is basically just renewal and replacement for those equipment and facilities. Section 3 is about revenues, reimbursements, and reserves. Section 4 provides a detail about the division budgets and goes into much more detail on the functions that we have under each of the divisions. And then section 5 is about policies and glossary. So this is a brief timeline of the budget. We started in a little early this time at the beginning of March when we sent the budget requests out to the various divisions. And then we received those requests towards the 3rd week of March. Then we compiled the budget, and then we had several review sessions. The appropriations limit was set in the last board meeting. So we have the budget workshop today, and this will be followed by adoption of the budget on June 16th.
CFO,
Yes, sir.
on 519, we set the appropriation limit, and we also had that hearing on staffing. That is something that the government, we are required to do.
Yes.
Okay, I like to see it up there under that 519 date. We did that. We had it. We voted on it. Now we post it up there. Anybody question us, we can say, look at the budget.
Yes. And well, thanks for bringing that up because we did add that resolution. Section 5 has a signed version of that resolution, and it's going to be part of the.
Good, but I like to see it up there under 519.
Okay.
We set the appropriation, we did a resolution, and we did that one. To do.
The vacancy?
Yeah, the vacancy.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, the vacancy.
The AB, the new legislative.
Yes,
Okay.
the requirement that we are saying, because I've been looking at that and I didn't look up what we called it, whatever, but we need.
Yeah, good point. We'll include that.
Yeah, we'll include
For
that. Yes.
The 16th.
Yes.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Thank you.
I'm sorry to
Thank you for
cut
that.
you off, but I wanted to catch that before I forget it.
Thank you for that. Yeah, that's a new law that went into effect in January of this year, so we'll start including that.
Thank you.
So the next 2 slides are about the board adopted strategy, and these are more principles that have been used to develop the budget. And as they say, if you want to be inspired, look at the future, and otherwise look at the past for experience. So here we're trying to look at the past and what was done before. So there are a set of 8 board adopted principles going back to 2004. And I think these principles are still relevant. And so we thought it would be prudent to just display it here. And they're also included in the staff report. So for instance, number 1, developing a structurally balanced budget. We follow that principle. Preserving existing services. making sure that there's minimum impact on district constituents and no adverse effect on staffing levels. Fully recovering service costs, which included, as part of this originally adopted strategy, it included seeking outside funding sources, which we have done by getting a number of grants, investing in strategic projects. So for instance, we have invested in the aquifer storage and recovery and the Pure Water Monterey project over the years. And then minimizing environmental impacts, which is the Carmel mitigation program. And then finally, also maintaining and replenishing the general operating reserve, starting from 5% at that time to above 50%. And over the past few years, our operating reserve levels have been pretty decent, and we have met this requirement. And then we have a projection for this, as you'll see in the.
Yeah, on that topic, I think, and we've discussed it a little bit internally, as we continue to be in the business of selling Pure Water Monterey water as a pass-through, so we're wholesaling, but that expense is becoming a dominant portion of the budget. And I think targeting a 50% reserve as inflation kicks in on that piece of our business is going to be a challenge over time. So we'll have to kind of relook at that, at least that one bullet point going forward. But
I can't raise my hand, but I would like to, George here, that middle bullet, fully or how you supplied.
Yes, and so I think the original intention of this element was to make sure that our expenditures, our revenues meet the cost of providing the service. And so our user fees should be enough, or whatever fees that we have should be enough to meet our day-to-day operating expenditures and our strategic priorities. That's my high-level understanding.
yeah, the first and the third bullets are kind of inextricably entwined together. The goal has been to not fund a budget through the use of reserves. You'll see in this budget that there is a little bit of reserves as a source and as a use. But the goal is we had a period of time that actually resulted in desperation, if you will, in 2011, where for a period of about 10 years, the district was balancing its budget based on reserves. And its revenues were habitually coming in below its budgeted planned revenues. And so that's a double whammy where you're under collecting and you're relying on reserves intentionally to balance the budget. So the goal in fully recovering service costs would be to make sure that our revenues, so in this case, primarily our user fee and our taxes, and of course, we now have purchased water sales, but ignore that piece of it for now, that our revenues would meet all of the expenditures. Because we're transitioning from a loss of the water supply charge, that won't necessarily be the case for the next couple of years, but the goal is to get to the point where your revenues are sufficient and reserves are just
the end through Zoom, but Dave, I appreciate that, and I remember some of those years in the early 2010s. But it seems to me the phrase might make more sense to me, at least, fully cover service costs as opposed to recover. But anyway, it's just a thought, and that's for clarification purposes. That's fine. I appreciate it. Okay, we can go on unless other board members have other comments.
George, do you mind if I ask a question?
No, please jump in. I can't see everybody.
Yes, about reserves. It would be useful if you could tell us how our reserves, our level of reserves, compares with any benchmarks that are out there, whether it's operating reserve or other, just to give us, maybe the benchmarks are, approximate or not a good match in every case, or there are differences in our special situation, but I think it would still be helpful to be able to compare.
Yeah, and towards that end, we plan to put some thought into this exercise and develop a detailed reserve policy, considering the district's unique situation, the litigation and contingent liabilities that we have, the pension liabilities, healthcare related liabilities. So all that needs to be looked at comprehensively. And then we can also benchmark each of those reserves because they might have different benchmarks depending on the type of reserve we have. So
Right, and the bottom bullet is a benchmark, not relative to others, but relative to policy. Look out our purchase water and our reimbursements. We're well exceeding that 50% target. But I get your point. It's a good one. And as Michelle said, later in the year, two of the things we've talked about with this board is looking at the reserve policy and also better revenue projection techniques so that we have a better handle on where we're headed. So I think from the standpoint of it is a calendared item that sometime later in this calendar year, we will be talking about reserves, but it's a good point. The only benchmark we have is that other agencies.
that does remind me of a benchmark that GFOA has, and it says that the operating reserve needs to be a minimum of 16.67%, which is 2 months of operating expenditures, but that's the bare minimum. We don't want the bare minimum. 50% of budget would get us 6 months of operations, but what is an operating budget? That's something that we need to define. Does it include the purchase of water or not? So those questions need to be answered through that policy.
Thank you.
Okay, proceed, please.
Got it. Thank you. Continuing on, so this slide is about the budget process itself. And the process is we get requests from the divisions, then we forecast revenues, then we compile our personnel expenditures, which is based on our adopted MOUs, benefits, step increases, COLA increases, and then we forecast our services and supplies based on quotations received for professional services, and then we forecast our project expenditures. So that all comes together. We usually take a conservative stance when forecasting our funding sources or our revenues, and you'll see that in the capacity fees that we have, because I think we are pretty conservative there. The big changes in this budget is increase in purchase and sale of pure water, Monterey water. Of course, we don't have any water supply revenues, and then this. We, for the first time, I think in a number of years, as Dave mentioned, we are using reserves to balance the budget, but that percentage is very small. It's less than 1% of our budget. So it's not adversely affecting, the operating reserves by a large margin. And we already discussed developing a reserves policy in the next fiscal year. So this is the breakdown of the proposed budget, 46.58 million. The biggest chunk of this breakdown is purchase of water, 22 million. And I'll go into this in a little detail, but this includes the purchase of operating reserve. The second biggest expenditure item is reimbursement projects, 12.7 million or 28%. Personnel budget is at 6 million or 13%, and services and supplies, including election costs, are at 5% or 2.3 million. Now, this slide compares the proposed budget with the current mid-year budget. And if you look at the very bottom towards the bottom right, the net increase is 3.8% over current year's revised budget. And the two, actually, all four items are increasing. The two services and supplies and reserves are decreasing. So the personnel expenditures are going up by 7.5%, and that's a combination of a number of things. But one is COLA increases that are adopted through the MOU. Then we have increases for the GM salaries. And then the AGM budget is for a full year. And in the current year, we had only included 5 months of salaries for the AGM budget. So that all combines to bring this budget up to 7.5%. I hope that's not a shock.
Yeah, there were also the salary adjustments to other positions. Pretty,
There are some step increases in there too, yes.
but there were more than step increases.
You're right. We did the salary survey in the current budget year, so that would be reflected in 24, 25.
25,
So,
yeah.
So the comparison of the new budget to the current budget is primarily just the COLAs and the new positions.
Okay. Thank you.
But yes.
In terms of dollars, you can see salaries and benefits combined is around 450,000. So services and supplies is lower by 23%, and that's because we have a lower legal expenses, which I'll go into. And then project expenditures are higher by 13.5%, mostly because of additional sale of, purchase of water. And then reserves are lower by 3.3 million. And that's because we will be expensing the water supply reimbursement this year, but the cash is going to leave us next year. On what's the correct way to recognize this expense. And we were told that if the expense is known and measurable, then we need to recognize it this year. And so we have a preliminary judgment by the code, and we know what that expense is going to be. So we'll be recognizing it this year. However, the administration costs for the water supply charge will be expensed next year. And so that's in the services and supplies budget that you'll see in one of the next slides or coming slides.
Can I interrupt just a moment? Karen, the meeting from the inside, because I can't see the other participants and their hands up or whatever they might do and so on. And then I will just I'll try to get involved when I have a question or a comment or whatever. But I just feel very awkward trying to run the meeting from Zoom, and I can't see the people who might want to comment. So could you do that?
Of course I will. I was admiring your willingness to try it. It must be hard. Yeah, of course.
Well, I'm willing to try a lot of things new, but this was a little too new.
So speak up when, if you raise your hand and we don't notice, please speak up. Just jump in.
All right.
Okay.
Thanks, Sharon.
Okay. So we are on this slide, and I actually have a question about, and you might want to address it later, now or later, you can decide, but it's about where we had to cut in order to get to this budget. It's obvious that services and supplies were the major thing. And so just to give us a sense of, I tried to see from the detailed information in the draft. I noticed that staff training, for example, was one item. A lot less was allocated for staff training. There are probably some other things. So I think if you could just give us an idea I see the number of positions, the total number of positions seems to be remain the same. So
yes, we do have a slide on changes for services and supplies. And a detailed list of changes is on page 16 and 17 of the budget book, or page 34 and 35 of the packet. And we will be touching upon some of those things.
if you want to.
And if we don't, then, I'm happy to dive into more details.
Any other questions? Okay, carry on.
All right, so next series of slides is about project expenditures, and this is, one of the largest budget
We're
items.
down to 2 people. When's that?
John, hit mute.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so the we have over 37.5 million in project expenditures, which is distributed across these three major categories. Augmentation of water supply, 33.3 million. Now, this includes the purchase of water, the 22 million in purchase of water. So this number is high. Protecting environment, 3.3 million, and managing water demand at 860,000. And I'll be going over the details. But before we do that, this is a
Through the
good.
chair,
Go ahead.
augmenting the water supply. Where are we getting that money from?
So most of it, so 22 million of wholesale water sales is revenue from CalAm. And so we purchased the Pure Water Monterey water. There's a little bit of float, but we're paying Monterey One Water and then charging CalAm, and it's basically an offset, a push. There's about, I don't know, is it 9 or 11 million of grants that are still being used to
11.8 million.
11.8 million in there, which is the new, the sixth injection well for Pure Water Monterey. Part of the construction of the advanced water purification expansion. So we have 2 grants that we're managing in that direction. And then I think the IRWM grants are probably in there as well, which are,
Right.
we're the cog, but we're distributing that money to the city of Monterey for things like the Olivier diversion project and other integrated water resource management, IRWM projects.
Yeah, we get to the grant. These things been carried for years.
They'll be gone.
Well,
Okay.
I'd just like the public to know
Yep.
why we're not using them, all of it, and we carry it every year.
Yeah, that's a great point because it looks like we're doing things and those things will come to an end. The grant dollars have a lag in the processing as well. And so what's happened is the actual construction gets delayed, it gets carried over a year. Then you get into construction, there's out-of-pocket dollars and there's grant dollars, and then there's a reimbursement period for those grant dollars. So on an accounting basis, they may be current dollars, but on a cash basis, they're like 3 months behind. And so on accounting basis is we expect to expend the last of the grant proceeds in this fiscal year, upcoming fiscal
For
year.
the Pure Water Monterey project.
Yeah, so in 2026, 27, you won't see 11 million of reimbursement projects. They'll be over.
Okay.
Yeah, budgeting for capital projects can be challenging because they're driven by the pace of the construction activity. And we start off with a certain estimate at the beginning of the year, then the project gets delayed and not all of it gets expended. So we take the money and take it to next year based on that year's estimate. But I think we are at the end point. This November, the project should get finished, and then all this big grant that we have will go away, and then we'll be left with the IRWM 1 and 2 grants.
All right. I probably have another question on that in a little bit, but go ahead. Thank you, Chair.
And this is a visual of the projects that we have, at least the big ones. The ones in the blue on the top that's the ASR facility, the Pure Water Monterey injection well, and the advanced purification project on the very top, on the north in the marina. And then there's a fish counting weir station on the left, I believe that's another blue, and all the greens are the IRWM grants. We thought, for this might be good for someone to know, like, where are all the projects distributed. And then of course we have the Sleepy Hollow facility, but that's like at the very down, it's outside of the map area. And now we'll go into the details. Next slide, please. So now we're going into the details for the 3 categories that we just mentioned before. So under augmentation of water supply, these are the big expenses. Purchase of pure water Monterey water for 20.9 million. Now this includes, or we have budget to buy 4,812 acre feet of water. This is more than what we have purchased. We have been purchasing 3,500 acre feet every year, but this budget is based on the assumption that by November, the expansion project's going to be over, and that expansion project will start producing water at the rate of 5,750 acre feet during the year. So we have prorated those amounts, and we have budgeted for 4,812 acre feet for next year. And then the expansion budget, that's 9.2 million. This is the one that should go away if the project gets done by November. We also have a budget to buy about 250 acre feet of operating reserve. That's the 1,089,000. And then the budget for Measure J expenses, public's acquisition of water system, that's at 600,000. This is about 1/3 less than what we originally budgeted in the current year. And that's based on, the pace of activity that we have been seeing. This is for, I think the litigation has delayed, and, our pace of spending seems to be at the rate that we have budgeted. We'll see how it lands, and if there are changes, we can make those changes during the bid year.
So we have money. For instance, if something really different happened, that we can move forward to get back on
Yeah.
track. We're not cutting ourselves down where
Right.
we,
And we've always had the philosophy that, well, prior to your decision to adopt the resolution of necessity, prior to that, we didn't budget because there was no promise that we were going to follow through. Now that you've agreed to follow through, we could actually budget a little bit more based on the expected litigation, which is what we're doing. But because of that, because the Supreme Court picked up the Apple Valley appellate decision, that's dragging us out. So now we're actually admitting that we're budgeting for the acquisition, but now we're matching it with the timeline. And it's just, but if the timeline were to suddenly shift, which I would personally prefer it to speed up,
I would too, but
we have the money in.
thank you.
So continuing on, other major expenditures in this category, Santa Margarita site, 396,000, operations for the aquifer storage and recovery, 465,000. Updating the urban water management plan. This was approved by the board in the last board meeting, 150,000. And then budgets for updating the seaside basin model and exploring alternatives for permit 2088B.
And that's for the reservoir, right? That's for the,
Yep.
okay,
It's our Los Padres
yes.
dam, right, that we peel off a piece for ASR, and then we peeled off a second piece, and we're developing some concepts. Otherwise, there's always the issue of a revocation hearing or a revocation even without a hearing.
Okay.
So moving on to.
I want to jump in quickly, please, just to
do.
say, Dave and Nichelle, I'm glad to see some identification of future costs explained in a way that shows we are looking ahead. It supports the transparency question that may come up, but it also shows that we're not just doing year to year. I mean, we are doing year to year, but some of those year to year factors relate to future years. And I just appreciate sharing that picture. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So this is the next slide, breakdown of major project expenditures under environmental stewardship. So the major expenses here are related to the IRWM 1 and 2 grants. And these are carry forwarded because again, the pace of spending here has been slower than expected, but we carry forward the budget to the next year. And if that pace increases, then we have the budget to pay for those expenditures. And then we have 439,000 for Sleepyhead Rescue, Steelhead Rescue and Sleepy Hollow operations. That's the Aqueduct Resources fisheries line. Hydraulic monitoring, 185,000. That's for water quality analysis, stream flow monitoring, and other activities. And then we're also proposing a budget of 100,000 for mitigation program review. Now, not all of this budget might be expended, and it looks like we might end up doing some of this work in-house. But we have a placeholder budget for 100,000 here.
Yes, I was going to ask about that. So we tentatively plan to use a outside consultant for some of that mitigation program review? Yeah,
Possibly. Yeah.
possibly. Okay.
Yeah, we have internal staff working on that item that you may recall we discussed at strategic planning that should we choose to carry on the mission, we need to kind of adopt a new set of findings.
Yes.
Staff is encouraging me to not hire a third-party consultant at this time, but we still have money for it.
So staff feels that they could take that on in addition.
Well, they've been developing the skeleton of a document in support of the mitigation program, because we've got a whole variety of things we're supposed to be doing under water rights, and other requirements like our Section 10 permit for the Steelhead program has certain requirements. So whereas the mitigation program was started with the EIR in 1990, many aspects of it are still required in these other things, the Section 10 permit and the water rights. And they're going to piece together that case as staff rather than an outside consultant saying, here's what you need to do. That's where we think, that's where they want it to be. So we're giving them the chance to do that. We're encouraging them to do that.
Two grants up there, integration, regional water management. Are there federal grants?
These are state, and there aren't really federal grants for these programs. And I misspoke earlier calling these water augmentation. As of right now, these are primarily stormwater interdiction.
Okay.
So it's treated more as environmental mitigation. As soon as we figure out how to fund the taking of those stormwater diversions and sending them to pure water Monterey, they'll become water augmentation. So.
Okay, so we don't have to worry about the federal government coming here,
No,
taking stuff.
yeah.
And losing. Okay, thank you.
So none of those none of the projects that have been already approved are actually going to get the stormwater to pure water monitoring.
Correct.
Yeah, okay, but that might be feasible in the future.
Yeah, and the Olivier was planning. So it was planning money, design money. So the design is to ultimately send it to the interceptor and send it to pure water, but it's not construction funded yet. So.
Cool.
Well, I don't know when would be a good time, but if that is, when it seems to be a good time to consider that, maybe we could look at that in the water supply planning committee.
Yeah, so we've had this, and actually Mike in his previous position identified, I think it's 5 stormwater diversion projects, and we've kind of cobbled them together in a request for federal money that we've got. So the whole federal process is in a authorization and then an appropriation. And so we've got authorization for up to 20 million. We don't have an appropriation yet. So to get these little stormwater projects into pure water Monterey. And that would be a good use of our own resources because it would augment pure water with, some of these additional supplies. But, the problem, of course, is things like Lake Elistero is 41 acre feet. So they're small additions. There's the lake at the Naval Postgraduate School. There's Roberts Lake. There's a Del Rey Oaks stormwater potential. They're all super teeny tiny, but to quote Supervisor Lopez, when you're trying to fill a bucket, every drop counts. So when that quote works in our favor, I'll use it. When it works against us, I'll push back. But we may want to fund those ourselves at some point if we
Yeah.
can't get the appropriation.
If the actual gap between supply and demand is really not that big, then a small augmentation might be.
Well, and the source water discussion and, do you have enough source water? Anything we can do to put more water into the pure water project's a good idea.
Okay,
Back to the presentation. So this is the third major category, managing water demand. And here, the biggest budget is under water conservation. We have about 167,000 for outreach, communication, sponsorships, community events, about 140,000 for conservation programs. That's for conservation devices, I believe. And then there's, I think, a conservation workshops and other things which are kind of listed in the budget book. And then rebate programs. This has two components. There's a reimbursable component where CalAm reimburses for rebates, so that's 350,000. And then there's a non-reimbursable component which we call the courtesy rebates. And this is for properties that are within the district's jurisdiction, but not in CalAm's jurisdiction. That's a small 20,000 component. So that makes up the 370. And then outside of that, we also have 100,000 for demand management, and that's mostly for deed restriction, recording, legal review, and CEQA work. So now we are going to be switching over to changes in the services and supplies budget. And I'll tell you what the blue means, but we'll start off with insurance, which is going up by 12.3%. And this includes everything from general liability, property liability, workers' comp, and earthquake insurance. And these costs come directly from SDRMA, which is Joint Powers risk management pool that we use. So those costs have gone up. Utilities are up by about 8.8%. We just looked at existing trends and we put in a number there. Facilities maintenance up 20%. We plan to buy a little more furniture next year and maybe make some changes to the conference room. And we've also looked at our maintenance expenses from fire alarm systems to HVAC units to elevators. And we think that is a number that would serve us for next year. Professional services is down by 11%, and that's because we hired a new auditing firm. Their costs were slightly lower, and we also don't plan to use RGS for HR recruitment work. We have been starting to do some of the recruitment activity in-house, so there's a small savings there. Telephone costs are also down 25%, and that's because we switched. We had AT&T, like 4 AT&T lines, and then our entire telephone network is being managed by the Maynard Group. We switched the AT&T lines to the Maynard Group, and that resulted in savings of 25%. So,
well done.
Well, it may go down further because I've been holding on to our conference calling, which I don't know how much that is a month. It's not very
about
much.
800, yeah.
But I don't think anyone has used it in 12 months. So it may be time to, you want to have that option because, what if people are in cars traveling and so forth? But gosh, if no one ever uses it.
Everyone's getting used to Zoom now.
Yeah.
Zoom and Teams, right? Administering the water supply charge reimbursement. So that's all clubbed together. And these are mostly charges from postage and shipping to cutting checks and notices that need to be sent out. The biggest change is in the bottom, a negative $545,000 for legal expenses. So this year we spent that money to pay the attorney of the plaintiff. And that cost was a one-time thing. We won't be incurring that again. So
What-
that's the big negative change that you see.
Sorry, what,
For the water
Taxpayers.
supply.
water supply charge?
Yeah.
A lot of money.
Kearney Little or whoever the name of the attorney was, but yeah. Under services and supplies, we also have a number of service. Here, legislative services through the Ferguson Group and TGF, public outreach through Wellman, legal services through Delray Laredo, IT services through Devera, audit services through the Prun Group, and then GIS services systems or links technologies. And these numbers haven't gone up.
Before we move on with facility maintenance, did we get our new emergency generator put in? Is that
Yes, that-
done?
It's done. The biggest holdup was a permit from the Air Resources Quality Board. And I think it's on its last legs, but if you see the generators out there, and we have been testing it every now and then.
Okay, and another one, I heard you earlier talking about buying another vehicle.
Mhm.
Now, are we staying on schedule or is it time to lay back a little bit?
No,
Because
that
of that-
one's a 23-year-old vehicle, I believe, 20.
Okay,
Yeah, that's like a 2001
Yeah.
Dodge Ram. The battery's out and the car's just sitting here in the parking lot like a dead weight. And so that we have no utility, it needs to go.
okay,
Yeah, no, we're doing pretty good. And then the newer trucks, have all been Ford. I'm still reminded when Director Hoffman said, "Hey, Dodge Rams are the car of the year. How come we're not, buying them?" And it's like, well, we get a discount with Ford, and we do manage that process pretty well. But there was a period of time where we were woefully behind, and now we're on a pretty good schedule.
okay, and here's one more for you. The taxpayers lawsuit. We haven't hired any staff for that. Is that gonna be farmed out to somebody that cost is already in here?
Well, we have established a budget for it, and that budget is paid out of the settlement funds. So when he's reflected the outflow of the 3.4 million that we've held in reserve, part of that 3.4 million will cover the costs. And there are costs. There's postage costs, printing costs. We've
Okay.
been using a GIS specialist who's our GIS specialist, but we're accumulating those hours separately as kind of outside his contract to us. And so they're all there, but they're getting covered through the 3.4 million that you see reflected in the current budget. He did point out that the $545,000 was the legal expense that we paid in the current year that we don't expect in the budget year. What's not reflected is there's been some discussion about the Sierra Club's claim for legal fees. We have not budgeted for that because A, we think they have no claim, and B, it's potentially going to run through to the next fiscal year after that anyway. And, so we can't really project, but there may be a loss of legal fees in
But
that case.
we're still working under the notion of pay as we go.
Yeah.
So that's why I want to make sure everybody know that we're still paying as we go. Bill come up, we will take care of it.
And that's part of your reserve policy too, which is unforeseen
Mhm.
settlements. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so back to the presentation. This is an attempt to link the budget with our strategic priorities. And not every goal can be linked one-on-one, but here you can see that goal number 1 is getting the maximum if you consider the purchase of water. And then goal number 2, implementation of the public ownership. For measure J, that's 600,000. Goals 3 to 6 is some combination of operating budget and capital budget. But the budget is an exercise where we match goals and give price tags to those goals. And that's what we're attempting to at least show here. That these are inextricably linked together.
Sounds okay though.
All right, I'll keep moving. So now we come to the revenue side of the budget, and we call this estimated revenues because budget is just the expenditures. These are estimated revenues. And 45% of our revenues are water sales. That's 20.9 million. The next big category, reimbursements, 12.9 or 28%. And then user fees is at 17%. And I'll go into the details of how we, forecasted this in the next slide. Property tax, 3 million or 7% of the budget. And then capacity fees is 450,000. What's interesting here is interest costs are at 600,000, which is actually higher than our capacity fees. So it's still a substantial amount if you consider like the big revenue streams. So what has changed? Our operating revenues are higher by about 26%. That's 33 million. And our reimbursement and grants are lower by 8%. And then the budget anticipates using 558,000 of fund balance to balance the budget. And then the new vehicle that we plan to purchase, we plan to use our capital reserve. So that's the 55,000 there. So combining all of that, our total revenue comes to 46.58. And this is a breakdown of that revenue, starting with the biggest one, water sales at 20.9 million. Now here, the amount of water that we are purchasing has gone up by about 35% from last year. And then the rate of water is also up by 4.5%. So together that changes a 43% increase. User fees are up by 5.4% or 7.8 million. And here, which has been under 6%. And then we've also looked at the revenue forecast provided by CalAm through their advice letters. And then we calculated the adjustments and the rate increases and how those increases are distributed in the next year. And that approximately comes to about 7.8 million. Probably.
The user fee is a percentage of the,
Yes, that's
From
the
components of the-
8.325% of the total revenues collected by CalAm.
but is the fee a percentage of the customer's bill or some
Yeah,
portion of
it-
it? Because
Yeah, unfortunately, it's not the whole bill.
it's part of the bill, yeah.
Most
It's
of
the
it.
volumetric charge plus the meter charge
Mhm,
times 8.325%.
mhm.
The Pure Water Monterey purchase cost is levied as a surcharge on the bill.
Yeah.
Our comments during this upcoming rate case are going to be to try to move the surcharge into base rates because it's such a significant piece.
Mhm.
And we will encourage, CalAM is going to want to keep the purchase water surcharge as a surcharge. We think that they could take a base piece of it, say 90% of the total cost of purchasing Pure Water Monterey water, roll that into base rates, and then if they need flexibility, the rest of it can be a surcharge, but you shouldn't surcharge the entire Pure Water Monterey purchase water cost.
Mhm.
And so if that were to happen, then, the volumetric and meter charge would obviously go up in rates, and that would help our user fee, but
Mhm.
that's not the sole reason to do it. It's just,
It's a major cost.
surcharge proliferation has been a problem.
Right,
So,
right.
So the only thing you don't see here are those reimbursement revenues, basically.
which is
I
the
think.
next slide.
Yeah.
Yeah, property tax up 3.4%. We have in the current year, 2.9 million in property tax revenues. This is a slight increase. Capacity fees going up by 12.5%. We have a number of multifamily projects that are coming up, and we believe that this is a conservative estimate of those capacity fees. Permit fees, no change, and interest revenue, this is a slight reduction. And it's hard to predict where the interest rates are going to go, but we're assuming that they will go down by a small margin. And then we have other revenues for deeds and whatnot. So, yes.
Go over the capacity fee issue again, and first of all, please define it. Never remember this one. Somebody, whoever.
So
It's capacity, connection charges.
it's a connection charge. It basically, when somebody pulls a water permit, they're adding an increment of water to, or an increment of demand to the system. So if you do a home remodel and you're adding a bathroom, it's a, little tiny increase in water use. If you're doing 100 but because we've paid for water projects, we're still unreimbursed, maybe over 12 million on the Pure Water Monterey project. The concept of a connection fee is, welcome new user. You're going to make a down payment on past expenditures in the water system. And so it's, we call it a capacity fee, but it's very much like a connection charge.
Right, it's like a fixed cost related to increasing water capacity in the system.
And we've tried to levelize our expectations, but as an example, when the new Marriott in Sand City came in for their water permit, it was a huge check. And and Nichelle just spoke to that there are a couple of projects that are out there that may land in this budget year, the new budget year. But we've tried not to overly predict the growth. Obviously if we're successful at lifting the CDO, and it'd be helpful if Josh, while listening, would encourage CalAm to participate in that. But the lifting of the CDO would likely see some raw land development with the setting of new meters and so forth. And so we haven't forecasted that level of development. But should it happen, if it were to happen mid-budget year, you might see some pent-up demand come out and capacity fees would be higher, but we're not counting on the windfall.
And talking about that permit fees, when was the last time we looked at them, raised them? I don't want to see us haven't done nothing in 4 or 5 years and then come up there slam.
Yeah, so curiously, I had us look at them about 5 years ago because I thought they were too high. And I thought we should cut everybody a break and reduce them. They were originally set, I don't know, 25, 30 years ago, but there was in our ordinance that established them, there's a CPI every year. So they go up by the CPI, and you adopt that every year by, I think by resolution.
Yeah, you'll look at this in the next board meeting. We'll look at the Bay Area CPI index and bump this.
Well, and
So-
also the processing fees and the various different fees and charges.
Yeah, so we do get reimbursed for legal review and so forth as well. But anyway, so that's the voice that made me get off the idea of reducing them. And and one part of it was, hey, look, we're into Pure Water Monterey for 12, 13 million of as yet unreimbursed, and we don't have we don't have an administrative overhead on the Pure water sales. So we're just passing through the costs. So we're never getting reimbursed for that 12 million except capacity fee buy-in. And so that was what convinced me to not reduce the capacity fees, because we have had, we spent 6 million on the ASR treatment building. You know, there's things we spent money on that are, you know, real out of pocket. So when a water permit is pulled and a end user pays our capacity fee, it's gone to kind of, right now, let's say it enhances reserves, but we used a lot of money to build those projects. So
I just don't want to see us get behind on permit fees where you come on up and asking for 10%, 15%
yeah,
raise in them, and you give sticker shock to the public, and they, you know. I know these other utilities every year, our rates are going up, so.
yeah, our hope is to actually, you know, keep capacity fees where they are and then start reducing the user fee if we're getting beyond our later in the year to be adopted reserve policy. You know, once we hit a point where our revenues are exceeding our sensible uses, we should be giving the ratepayer a discount, you know, and move that 8.325% to 8% to 7.7%, you know, whatever is the market clearing rate. But
Okay.
I don't think it'll happen. The adjustments to our intake and our outflow should not be in the capacity fee. It should be in the user fee.
How is the permit fee determined? How is it calculated?
So Stephanie, you want to do that one?
Yes, I actually, please, thank you. So we're talking two different things. The capacity fee is the fee that we charge for the incremental amount of water that is needed for a project. And it is based on a cost per acre foot amount that has been adjusted since 1980. Geez, I think 1985, based. And that is just the amount of water that is needed for a project. The permit fees on this line item, 198,000, have to do with all the different charges that we charge for processing. And so staff time to do inspections, prepare permits, record documents, that kind of thing. The board actually will be getting an update on our fees and charges table at the June board meeting. And this will be the first update in about 5 years, as Dave said, that will adjust it to our current costs. And everything is based on what the amount of time is required to process various different kinds of applications times the amount of hours needed to do that. So you'll be getting that next month.
Very good. That's very good. That's good you're doing that. Thank you. And so that means that the permit fees are individualized.
They
based
are
on-
very individualized, yes.
And one thing that's not here, and I'm just going to state it without much discussion, we may have some administrative fines in this coming budget year, but we've not projected those.
Oh, don't say that.
Yeah.
That's something I'm
Our
gonna
our goal is to not make money from fines, though. So,
Correct.
Right. To not, to
About time.
to not have reason to fine anyone. Yeah. The goal. 100% compliance.
Oh.
All right. Let's continue.
all right. So these are the reimbursements that Dave was referring to. The big reimbursements, the first one is from CalAm, 815,000. This is a reimbursement for the ASR project, and the 350,000 reimbursement for rebates. So that's the 815. And then the Pure Water Monterey expansion plus the 2 IRWM grants, that's 11.8 million in reimbursements. And then we have a bunch of smaller ones from Water Master, reclamation, deed restrictions. The other reimbursement category that you see here, that includes a reimbursement for the water distribution system permits, plus there's there's some remaining funds from the FEMA grant that we had that's unspent. So that's in the other category. So all of this is 12.9 million. And
Can we send it to North Carolina? I don't know if you saw that, you know.
These are the sources and uses that show that the budget is balanced. District revenues are 33 million, project reimbursements are 12.9. And as we saw earlier, we are using 558,000 in fund balance from the fund balance, plus the 55,000 from the capital reserve. So that's the 613 that you see here under sources, the first table. And then the bottom table is the uses side. And here you can see the rough 80-20 split between operating costs, the personal services and supplies operating, and then the capital cost, which is the project and other expenditures, including water sales. And then under uses, we also have a reserve contribution to pension and other reserves, which we'll see in a coming slide. So that's 46 million, 46.5 million in sources and uses. That's how we come to a balanced budget. Now, as part of the budgeting exercise, we also want to balance the short-term needs with the long-term needs and
Yes.
obligations. And
Yes.
so, yes,
Is
Chair.
that George?
How's everything?
Very good.
I think we have somebody needs to be muted.
Thank you too, you too.
That's George and his nurses.
Oh,
All right. So here we are looking at our future obligations and commitments. We have an obligation to purchase 2,875 acre feet of operating reserve. We are at 2,819, but so we need to buy around 680 acre feet of water for our operating reserve. So that's an outstanding commitment. That's around 3 million in current dollars. And then we have a pension obligation of 7.6 million and an OPEB, which stands for other post-employment benefits obligation, which is for healthcare related costs for our retirees. That's about 5.2 million. So together, our known obligations are around 16 million. But then we also have an unknown component, which is the legal liabilities, and we can't quantify them yet. So that's in the unknown category, and that's why we have the operating reserve. And again, this all needs to be fleshed out when we develop the reserve policy. But here we're just trying to list the major.
and these future obligations, what is the time frame?
The reserve, I think, is driven by the agreement that we have.
So it's within 3 years of initiation. So we have what's called a performance start date. Within 3 years of that, we need to be topped off. We're kind of hoping that this month, well, it's not quite June, next month, that there will be some excess over the 3,500 that we're contractually obligated, so that we'll make a purchase in the current fiscal year against some of that 200 and whatever acre feet you said it was.
Yeah,
But then
250.
the ultimate goal is maybe 10 years into the process, reducing that reserve requirement so that part of that asset that we're sitting on, which is water in the ground, could then be utilized as a drought reserve or some other purpose rather than having to just hold it all the time. But I think we need to demonstrate long-term operating security. But it's 50% of a single year's obligation. So it's a 6-month reserve. And so that's, for a 5,750 acre foot annual requirement, it'll be half that, or whatever half that is,
Right.
2875. And so we're just a couple hundred acre feet short of it right now. So
Well, it's a very large operating reserve, isn't it? So this amount here on the slide is the additional amount we need
additional-
because of the expansion, or just
yeah, we're beyond what we need for the base project,
Yeah.
but we're not quite where we need to be for the expansion. And we'd like to front run it if we can, because once we expand, there's the surplus capacity in the base project is a bigger percentage of the capacity than the surplus capacity of the finished expanded project will be. So there's, what am I trying to say? There's less capacity to create extra water with the expansion. So better to get the reserve filled in advance if we can.
Thank you.
So with our pension obligations, have we heard anything from PERS, the way the market is going up and down, and what we undone with salaries around here that it's going up? Have we heard anything, and are we prepared if it go up with what we put in reserve for the last, 4 or 5 years?
Right. That's a great question. And just to answer your question first, for pension and OPEB, the actuarial report projects it out for 30 years. So the time frame is much bigger than what we have for the first obligation. And then to your question, based on the market, gyrations, and the increases that we had, our pension liability obligations is probably going to go up. We'll get a better idea when we get a valuation report. CalPERS publishes a valuation report every other year, and that says, hey, this is your pension liability. And for the question is, are we contributing enough towards these liabilities? I want to say no, but we'll have a policy that says what's our targeted funded ratios. Like I think right now our funded ratio is in the 70% or lower. And ideally we want to be around 90%, but that should all be covered in a formal document.
So we should be looking for future increases in that next year?
Yeah, well, so
Or
he's
wanna get
correct that we're
big
not
here.
really funding it. The problem with both of the pension and OPEB obligations are that they're kind of a continuing thing. It's not like you can pay off your mortgage in 30 years. It's like you hit the 30th year and your mortgage is still there. That obligation, there's always going to be some balance in the obligation. What we're seeing is as people retire, the old classic employees are going down, so the pension obligation should be going down with those, but the OPEB will be going up with more retirees. The new employees are covering much more of their pension obligation just the way PEPRA was structured. So as we get rid of old people like me, we're in a better position on the unfunded pension obligation side. So, if we could get to 100% post-PEPRA employees, which eventually we will, then the PERS obligation will be steady at whatever it is, but it won't be rapidly increasing.
Okay.
And then, as we old people really die off, then maybe that obligation will go down. But
Don't say die off.
yeah,
Yeah, without going into details, there's a concept called intergenerational equity, where those who contributed towards an obligation should be the ones paying for it and not the future generation shouldn't be paying for the past generation. But anyways, that's probably getting too much into detail. I think some of that should be captured into a formal reserve policy. So we'll put some thought on that side. So how much are we contributing towards these obligations? Right now, we are doing what we have done in the past, and we've set aside 100,000 each for pension and OPEB. And then the capital reserve, this is based on the depreciation schedule for the equipment and the facilities. And that's, I think, in page 33, you will see how we came up with the 326,000. So all in all, that's 526,000 in reserve contributions. And yes, sir.
The top one, general reserves, how come we got a blank in there? We
Well,
just tell the public.
yeah, so if our revenues would have exceeded our expenditures, and if we weren't contributing those revenues into any of the other three categories below, then we would have a general fund contribution. But revenues, so general fund contribution or general reserve contribution is zero.
Okay.
You know, on that reserves issue, so you may remember earlier, there was a slide that shows our sources and uses, and one of the sources is about 613,000 from reserve.
reserve, yeah.
But here we are making deposit of 526,000 to reserves. So in effect, to balance our budget, it's really just that 90+ thousand difference between what we're taking from reserves and what we're putting in reserves. So it's really inconsequential what we're taking out of reserves to balance our budget. But it's a little bit like reassigning reserves, you know, so we've taken from the general and reassigned to pension, OPEB, and capital.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And there's 90 some odd $1,000 that's going to salary, services, and supplies or whatever. So it's, you know, that's accounting, I guess, or, you know, budgeting, but yeah.
I'm sorry, can,
Oh, so if you don't expend, that 90,000, then it could be even at the end of the year.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
and because we don't have a dedicated trust fund for pension or OPEB,
ProPAP.
they're still discretionary. So if there was a major issue, you could actually use those reserves in addition to your general reserve. So, yeah.
I do recall that. Okay, let's continue.
So finally, we come to one of the, I think this is the last major slide. This is our best estimate of where the reserves will be at the end of the next fiscal year. And we are projecting that our operating reserve will be still more than 16 million. Again, this will all depend on actual revenues and expenses, and this situation can change every money leaving. So it's a hard estimate to do, but the reserves capital reserve of 2.2 million, and then pension OPEB combined will be 1.6 million. And litigation is still at 250,000. Now, draw the litigation reserve because we paid some legal payments this fiscal year. But if our revenues are enough to cover our expenditures, then we might not draw on the litigation reserve. So we set it at we kept it at 250,000 for next year. And then the water supply charge, that's going to go away, the 3.3 million. And so that's going to be zero at the end of next fiscal year.
But I think, we should heap a little bit of praise on Nishil because he managed to get the water supply charge off the tax bills this year,
Yeah.
which saved a whole bunch of machinations with respect to dollars, and it made our budgeting process much more clear because the water supply charge that you see at the bottom there was already sequestered. We kept it as identified that, maybe we're going to have to return it. So expectations were already managed in the last budget that 3.4 million really wasn't ours to hold on to very long. And so it made the whole budget exercise a little cleaner here than it could have been given the way that settlement ended up. So
Very, very helpful.
Yeah.
Good move, and I guess you had to move very quickly, didn't you? To get that.
Yeah, and the county also kind of helped us, and I think it's a joint effort both from our side and the county officials. Yeah, prevention's better than cure, and I'm glad that we were able to take it off the books in time.
What's the flood drought reserve? This is not water, this is money we're talking.
Yep.
So
let me give you an example of how it's been used. In 2016, we were in the 4th year of drought, and we decided to do a public outreach campaign called Go Blue, I think is the phrase, save water, go blue. And we budgeted 90,000 plus that wasn't in the budget. And we took it from the flood drought reserve. If flooding were to, well, for example, our fish weir got wiped out during heavy flows. We didn't tap the reserve for that, but that would be a use of the reserve to replace the fish weir if it's unexpected due to either flood or drought.
Thank you. Okay.
And that brings us to a close. There's no formal action needed here. We can take public comments, discuss, and I'm available for any questions, comments, thoughts.
And you wrote down,
brings us to a close.
Director Edwards, a comment about just identifying that we passed the resolution on open positions, the
Yes.
Laredo.
Not resolution, is held the public hearing.
Yeah, held the public hearing. So other than that, any additions or clarifications that you as board need?
Well, I'd like to, before we continue, I'd like to check with Chair Riley. Do you have any questions or comments?
Not specifically on the budget items. I have general comments over the overall presentation and so on. And I would like to comment when that's appropriate, but I don't know if this is the time for that on the budget issues and numbers and, categories, or a summary a little later on. I don't know how much more is left of the meeting. That's all I'm really.
We're there.
So we can take comments from you and other directors now, and then take it out for public comment if there is any public in attendance. So.
Well, I would prefer public comment, come back,
Okay.
take Becca before me, and then I'll go next, and then Karen, you can wrap it up.
We can do it that way. Let's see if is there any public in attendance at this point,
Yeah.
Sarah?
We do have one member of the public in attendance, but we have no raised hands.
Okay, once again, just if this member in attendance does have comments, this would be the time.
I just appreciate the work that was done. The narrative was amazing. Thank you. And now my brain hurts from all the math.
Yeah.
Get used to it.
Is that it from you for the moment?
That's it for me from the moment.
Okay.
This is my first budget meeting like this, so it's been very informative. I appreciate it.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I think as Nishil said in the beginning, it seems like a lot of improvements are being made.
Yes.
And I appreciate also the way information is presented from different angles. So you see the same information presented in different, sort of from different angles, the best way I can describe it. And I appreciate that to help our understanding.
Job well done. It's clear. I think we discussed a lot of it and cleared it up, so we can point the public to this meeting right here for the next meeting that we have when we approve the budget. But I like to go over in the future some of those numbers that y'all added on to this. Let the public know what we have done. Future, think about that one. Tonight was a good one for the numbers and going over with the public. What's all this mean, and the explanations that y'all gave were very, very good. So job well done to staff and to you, CFO and general manager and assistant general manager. So
Well said, I agree.
And I want to add something that, and I know George has comments and you
Mhm.
probably have comments, but when you take away our wholesale purchase water and the capital investment, we're about a $13 million budget. And we've had folks like Mr. Rowley come to us and say, you're growing out of control and this place needs a Doge, and different comments about the size of our budget. But we have built things, and now we're not building as much stuff, but we built things that are producing benefits. I
Mhm.
mean, let's face it, CalAm has been in compliance for 4 years because Pure Water Monterey exists. But we're only really a $13 million operation. We haven't grown radically from where we were 10 years ago. And so we're applying money very smartly, and we produce things with it, but we're not growing out of control, which, you know, we're going to have to make that message clear on the 16th as well, because it looks like it's a big budget. You know, we're $44 million, $46 million operation, but the core has not changed that much.
That's for the public.
Yep, it's
That's.
completely beneficial. You know, yeah, it's money well spent, and it's, yeah.
To that beginning of the draft, district purpose and activities where you kind of go over, summarize the water projects, the water augmented supply projects. And I think it's very good to include something like this. It's 2.5 pages. I have to offer a few edits, suggested edits that I could send to you, just to make it even clearer, even sort of just drive the important points out of, to make it more memorable or clear, and a few things that weren't totally clear to me. So for clarity, so if you would not mind, I can just send you some suggested edits, and then you can.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank
Okay.
you. I appreciate that.
But I like that. This could also be a standalone. I mean, it's, I think it's a very good idea to include that, and it's well done. George.
I'd like to make a couple of comments. One is the clarification of a lot of the number issues were emphasized in a more summary fashion in this budget, which I thought helped create understanding, helped create transparency, but also led to a more focused discussion on the budget, I thought. So I thought those efforts to summarize some of the major issues in the way you did, Nikhil, was really helpful. So I want to congratulate you and Dave and the rest of the staff on. And for example, you include a map. I've never seen a map in one of our budget issues before, but you included a map on the location of where some of our investments are going. And I like that. Overall summaries, and the others have commented on that. I want to go back to just what Karen mentioned about the breakout of different ways to focus on the budget, and like the focus on water supply and that early narrative about what's in this budget and why it's in this budget. I just want to remind people that CalAm has owned the water system since the 1960s, I believe, mid 60s somewhere. And they have not provided a drop of new water in 60 years of ownership, not one drop. They've had plans and plans and plans and plans and plans, and none of them, not a single one of their plans have made progress. They might make a little bit of progress on some of the ASR wells this time around, but that's not new water. That's just moving water that's created elsewhere into the ground for their purpose. So anyway, I just want to remind what the district has done over the last 15 years or so, and identified here in the new water efforts that have been successfully pursued by the district and paid for by the district. Even though Dave wants to comment on, we are a $13 million operation, yeah, annually, day to day, but the result of that $13 million has been, another $30 million worth of water supply. So I think we ought to be enormously proud of what our leadership has done, what we've done by taking advantage of opportunities and science and willing cooperation from other agencies and the will to move forward. And I just congratulate everybody on that. and the history of the district over these large number of years, 15, maybe 20 years. I don't know how far back Dave wants to go, but I think all of those efforts are paying off, and we're seeing the benefits of it as we get closer and closer to a reliable water supply. The last thing I want to do is thank Nichelle and everyone for this kind of presentation, and I want to thank Karen for running the meeting. And Karen, I just would like if you could close the meeting if there are no more comments.
Thank you very much, George. I just want to, and I agree with everything you just said. Let's not forget our partner, Monterey One Water, in these projects, and Marina Coast Water District to some extent also, that we've been able to work to get those projects done is.
Workshop, you remember when? June 2nd. And, I'd like to be a fly on the wall to see if they remember us during their discussion.
Mhm. Well, it's good to be able to have a successful, that it's been successful. I'm sure it hasn't been easy, but it's been successful. Show that public agencies can work together, and in the future, regional water problems are to be solved. Other agencies are going to have to work together. So it's good to have us, that we were able to accomplish what we did with water supply so far. And again, I just want to add my thanks to the quality of the work, and they explain things very well, the way you present to us.
Well, and that is a very good comment. And I know that's a very small setting, so I'm going to repeat myself on the 16th, but Nichelle has added portions to this budget presentation that we have not had before, and they're very positive. It's a good look, feel. The information is relevant and useful, and so kudos to you, Nichelle. You've done a very, very nice
Thank
job.
you. Thank
Yeah.
you. I appreciate it. And we'll continue to improve it.
If I could just add one other comment. I am in a hospital, but I am really doing fine. And this may be the end of the procedures that I have to go through. There's been a cycle of three things. But anyway, I just want to share that while I have a captured audience. Thank you.
Can't wait to have you back, George.
Looking forward to it.
I don't know how many people could give a commentary like you did from your hospital bed, but I'm wondering what they're feeding you. Still strong.
Yeah, and thanks for participating from your hospital bed. Amy, you wanted to make a comment?
What I was gonna say is about the way Michelle put this together. As was mentioned, there's a number of different ways you're looking at the same information, whether you divide it by division, whether you divide it by, there's all kinds of ways that the material
Funds, yeah.
appears again and again, and then you start to get a feeling for all this interconnection.
Mm.
And, oh yeah, I know what that is, because we looked at it before, it was very helpful to me.
Yeah, me too.
It should be entered in a for prize,
Yeah,
the best budget.
very well done.
Check in 3 years after we take over Cal-Am, we have 90 new employees and a bunch of different cost centers and so forth. It'll become messy.
Okay, any last comments? Then we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.